Hurricanes are going to the Stanley Cup Finals. Wow.
Hey guys, welcome to the Puck Drops here. That was our introduction to the Carolina Hurricanes, who are a team that won the Eastern Conference in 2002. And part of one of the reasons they won it, although they did play absolutely well with how they were able to control the game, I will address a very strange rule that also happened in the NBA at this time that was currently in 2002 was the norm in the National Hockey League. And it had to do with the standings. The standings list, they were third in the Eastern Conference, but they were 35 and 26 and 5, and had a worse record than teams like the New York Islanders and the New Jersey Devils, as well as the Toronto Maple Leafs and Ottawa Senators. And the reason why they had such a high status was this obscure rule that, like it or not like it as it was, you had to, if you won the division, you were a top 3 seed. So they were the top 3 seed, and they ended up playing a team they had played in the second round the previous season, the New Jersey Devils in the first round. But we will look at their roster first. And the first guy that comes in is the right wing Craig Adams. Craig Adams, he was a big time, good scorer they had there. Kevin Adams as well, unrelated center. Badius Bataglia, and Ryan Bida, Jesse Bolerice, and Pavel Brendel, a bunch of young wingers. Rod Brindamore, their big-time younger center, that the Ottawa-born native, was an incredible scorer for them. Eric Cole, winger Jeff Daniels, Brad DeFaul, Harold Drukin, some more offense that were a lot of really young players. And their captain, longtime Whaler, who was traded to the Penguins and had come back to the new franchise, the Hurricanes, Ronnie Francis. An older version, however, though. Jeff Harima, Jan Havlik, Sammy Kapanen, Thomas Kirka, more wingers, European wingers that were really good, that were really deep. There's a very deep team on the wing. Darren Langdon, Craig McDonald, the underrated Jeff O'Neill, Damian Surma, Yaroslav Svoboda, who was becoming a great rookie and a great young player. Yusef Vasicek, a Czech center who had so much potential and had played so well in the previous playoff and was about to in this playoff. And Tommy Vesland, Radim Vibrata, who ends up playing for a long time with the Phoenix Coyotes later on in his career, was a young winger in the Carolina Hurricanes organization, as well as Mike Watt and Michael Zigomanis for the offense. Defensively, they had young defenseman Stephen Heiko and as well as Brett Hedigan, another defenseman who had become a veteran now, Sean Hill, Thomas Malik, Marik Malik, Bruno St. Jacques, David Tenabe, Nicholas Valine, who is becoming an extremely versatile puck-moving defenseman and still in a physical era, Aaron Ward, Glenn Wesley was the end of the Red Deer native as the end of that defense. The defense was not particularly skilled, but it could move the puck like their offense could, so it gave them such ability. The big starter was Artis Urbe, and the European started a lot of playoff games for them and made a lot of great saves and was a cornerstone. Their backup in Kevin Weeks, who later ends up playing for the Devils and the Rangers. The Toronto native was their backup, along with Jean-Marc Pelletier, the Atlanta native, and Patrick Deschois, the Penetang, Ontario native, a bunch of goaltenders that they had under their system. but the main starter and the main guy was Artis Irbe. When we look at the playoff year that they had, and they were the 3 seed, but they ended up playing the two times straight defending Eastern Conference champion Devils. And they had a game 1 against the Devils at home in Raleigh, and this time they were able to dictate the pace. The Devils had a whopping 35 shots on goal on Artis Irbe, and Carolina wasn't able to get many shots past Marty Brodeur, but the shots they were able to get were a sufficient amount because the Devils scored a power play goal, Carolina scored a power play goal. And the one first goal that was had for the Carolina Hurricanes was Ron Brind'Amour early in the first period, and then it became Eric Cole in the first period, 9:43 in, to make it 2-0 Hurricanes. The Devils finally got one past Artis Irbe. It was Patrick Elias, but with 35, the 35 shots on goal not enough, and Carolina took a 1-0 series lead at home. And they had another close game, but Irbe played insane again. Devils had 31 shots on him, but it wasn't enough for the Carolina Hurricanes and the Devils to win. Carolina had 28 shots on Marty Brodeur. They solved him twice. There were no goals in the first period, but 37 seconds into the second, Bobby Holik made it 1-0 Devils. Eric Cole, with 5 minutes left in the second period, tied it for the Hurricanes. There was no scoring at all in the second or third period later, but with 4 minutes remaining in overtime, Matthias Battaglia took a great pass by Malik right up the middle, and Battaglia scored a clean shot right under the stomach of a diving Marty Brodeur to make it 2-1 Carolina Hurricanes again in overtime, and a 2-0 series lead going now to Continental Airlines. And the Devils held serve at home. They were able to get 35 shots on Artis Irbe. They got 4 goals out of their hard work. Carolina had 16 shots on Marty Brodeur, but solved him not at all. Brian Gionta, his first playoff goal, 7:48 into the first. The young player made it 1-0 Devils. Brian Rafalski made it 2-0 Devils, 9:25 into the first. The pass was Shakira and Elias. Bobby Holik in the second period, 58 seconds in, made it 3-0 Devils, and Rafalski scored his second of the game and second of the playoffs, 2:17 in to make it 4-0 Devils, and New Jersey got their first win of the playoff year. It then got into Game 4, where the Carolina Hurricanes were trying to send it back to Raleigh, up 3-1 with a chance to clinch, and the Devils were trying to tie and take momentum clearly away from Carolina. It was 24 shots on goal for the Carolina Hurricanes and 22 for the Devils. It was a closer game, but Carolina only solved Brodeur once, and the Devils got to Irbe 3 times. A minute 16 into the first period, Bobby Holik made it 1-0 Devils. Again, his third goal of the playoffs, third goal against the Hurricanes. Gionta scored another goal for the Devils with only 3 minutes remaining in the first period to make it 2-0 New Jersey. Brian Rafalski in the third period, for there were no goals in the second period, 6:23 into the third, made it 3-0 Devils. Another power play goal, and Aaron Ward's first goal of the playoffs and was able to make it 3-1, the deficit 2, but Carolina wasn't able to score anymore, and the series was tied, heading back to rally, and now the momentum was firmly in the Devils' side because this is a team that had been there before, won before numerous times, and Carolina was a team that hadn't gone past the first round in their playoff history, and even as Hartford. New Jersey ended up playing a classic with the Hurricanes. They got 42 shots, a whopping 42 shots on Artis Urbe, but again, they weren't able to win. Carolina had 38 shots on Marty Brodeur and were able to find the victory. Bobby Holik in the second period again made it 1-0 Devils. 11:30 into the second to make it 1-0. And Marty Gellin, his first goal of the playoffs, the young winger, 13:44 in the second, it tied the game for the Hurricanes. Patrick Elias, 11:46 into the third, a power play tally made it 2-1 Devils, and with 129 remaining in the third period, Jeff O'Neill tied the game on a power play goal for the Carolina Hurricanes, and Josef Vasicek, 8:16 into that fourth period, fired a shot past Brodeur and made it 3-2 in favor of the Carolina Hurricanes and 3-2 series lead for the Carolina Hurricanes. And they got to Continental Airlines Arena for the Devils, who were trying to force a seventh game. And Carolina hadn't won at all in this playoff year in New Jersey. And Carolina got 22 shots on Brodeur, and the Devils got 32 shots on Urbe. And nobody let up any goals in the first period, but 10:29 into the second, Ron Francis, the veteran, grizzled veteran, finally got a puck past Marty Brodeur to make it 1-0, and Artis Urbe held the fort all the way out for a shutout to end the period, end the game, and end the series, which created an absolute just debacle for the Devils, who are an experienced team. But Carolina took it. They went down and got ready for the second round. And their second round meeting was against the 8-seeded Montreal Canadiens, who upset the 1-seeded Bruins in 6 games. And Carolina this was the only team that they were ahead of statistically, actually, in the standings. And they played Montreal at home in the second round now. Yeah, 38 shots on goal on the goaltender for the Montreal Canadiens, Jose Theodore, and the Canadiens got 25 shots on Artis Urbe, but it was for naught. There were no goals in the first period or second period, but Ronnie Francis was a hero again, 3:49 into the third, making it 1-0 Hurricanes. And with less than 3 minutes to go in the third period, Eric Cole made it 2-0 Hurricanes and finished it off and gave game number 1 to the Carolina Hurricanes. Carolina had a 1-0 series lead. And now, though, they had a whopping 46 shots on Jose Theodore, but he was in absolute God mode and stopped every single one of them. Well, not every single one. He let in a goal, but he was still in an absolute God mode, stopping nearly everything that was seen. And Carolina had a real issue stopping him and finding a puck past him. Montreal had 16 shots on goal. Saku Koivu made it 1-0 in favor of the Saku Koivu made it 1-0 in favor of the Montreal Canadiens, which made it 7:25 in the first period to make it 1-0 Canadiens. Andrei Markov, 16:51 in the first, to 2-0 Montreal. Dougie Gilmour in the second period was able to get a power play chance and drive it home. A pass from Audette and Joy Juno, 103 into the second to make it 3-0 in favor of the Canadians. Rod Brindamore finally got a goal in the second period, his second goal of the playoffs. 7 seconds left in the period with a power play to make it 3-1, but it wasn't enough. And in the third period, 2 minutes remaining, Bill Lindsay throws the puck down the ice and it goes in for an empty netter and seals the game 2, and the series was tied. The series was tied at 1 game apiece. Then the Carolina Hurricanes headed up to Molson Center in Quebec to play the Canadians, who had 20 shots on Artis Urbe, and Carolina had 34 shots on Jose Theodore, but again were unsuccessful. No power play goals, no goals in the first period. Then Saku Koivu got his 4th goal of the playoffs, 2nd goal against the Carolina Hurricanes by a great pass by Doggle. 9:03 into the second to make it 1-0 Canadians. Batis Baglia, 2nd goal of the playoff year by Brett Hedican, 3:24 into the third period, tied the game. But then Donald Audette, 2:26 into overtime, gave the Canadians a 2-1 series lead and a 2-1 victory in the best of 7 in overtime. And everybody was ready, of course, for that game number 4 heading down there in Molson Center between the Canadians and the Carolina Hurricanes. And the Hurricanes realized they needed to just absolutely pepper Jose Theodore. And the Canadians were not able to get a lot of shots on Artis Urbe. In the first period, again, Montreal took the lead. Andras Dackel, 10:56 into the first period to make it 1-0 Canadians. Yannick Perreault, 11:54 into the first, made it 2-0 Canadians. Sergei Brezin, 10:55 into the second period, made it 3-0 Canadians, and it looked like the series was getting out of hand for the Carolina Hurricanes. But then in the third period, 3:57 in, Sean Hill got a goal, which made it 3-1 Montreal. That was a power play tally. Batis Battaglia, 12:43 in, made it 3-2 in favor of Montreal still. And with 41 seconds remaining, with the extra attacker on the ice, Eric Cole sniped it past Theodore to tie the game at 3. And the comeback was complete, 3:14 into the overtime period. Nicholas Valine stunned the crowd and tied the series at 2, heading back to Raleigh. And it seemed that the air was collectively just lifted out of the Montreal dressing room as the Canadians were able to get 31 shots on goal on Artis Urbe and 31 shots on Jose Theodore were fired by the Carolina Hurricane team. But it just was not to the level it needed to be. In the first period, for the first time 3 games since game 1 for the Carolina Hurricanes, finally got a first period goal. 3:17 into the first, it was Jelena again. 2:13 into the second, Rod Brindamore scored in game 5 to make it 2-0 Hurricanes. Francis got the puck from Brindamore, the former face of the franchise, from the face of the franchise to make it 3-0 Hurricanes. Tommy Vestlund, 11:18 into the third, made it 4-0 in favor of the Hurricanes. And Carl Dykes, 14:32 in the third, finally got a goal past the stick side of Artis Urbe to finally put the Canadians on the board. And Batis Battaglia wrapped up game 5, 4 minutes remaining, with a 5-1 thumping of the Montreal Canadiens. And now the Canadians headed back to Molson Center, where they were in danger of being eliminated, and the Carolina Hurricanes were trying to get their franchise to the Eastern Conference Final for the first time ever. They had 32 shots on goal, Carolina did, on Jose Theodore, and the Canadians had 33 on Artis Urbe. But boy, did Carolina make good of their opportunities. In the first period, it was Eric Cole for the Carolina Hurricanes 25 seconds in. 3:33 later in the first period, Eric Cole scored his second goal, his sixth of the playoffs, making it 2-0 Hurricanes. Then the Hurricanes got on a power play. 7:55 into the first, Sean Hill made it 3-0 Carolina. Josef Vasicek, 14:58 in the first, made it 4-0 Hurricanes, excuse me. And then Kevin Adams, with less than 2 minutes remaining in the first, made it 5-0 Carolina. With 11 seconds left, Stefan Gendal finally scored for the Canadiens, but at the end of the first period, it was 5-1 Carolina on the road, and the collective air out of the building, out of Molson Center. Batis Battaglia got a power play goal, 5:55 into the second, to make it 6-1 Carolina. Sean Hill, 12:17 into the second, made it 7-1 Carolina, and the celebration had begun with a power play goal. And with 8 seconds left in the second period, just to add insult to injury, Jeff O'Neill scored to make it 8-1. Audette from Kinthal, 5:44 into the third, got a goal for the Canadiens, but the season was already over at that point. And so the Carolina Hurricanes were able to overcome the Montreal Canadiens onslaught and go on to the Eastern Conference Final for the first time. And they played another lower seed, and it was the Toronto Maple Leafs. And what a series this was. Game 1 was in Raleigh. And the Carolina Hurricanes knew they needed to get pucks on Curtis Joseph as much as possible, and Toronto needed to get pucks on Artis Irbe as soon as possible. Toronto got 24 shots on goal and 32 shots on Artis Irbe Curtis Joseph by Carolina, and Carolina scored on a bad turnover by the Leafs, 3:23 into the first by Jeff O'Neill. But Mo Gilney, who had been with the Sabres with the Devils for the last few years, he was now with the Maple Leafs. He knew this Carolina team, and he pounced on the opportunity by a great pass by Caberlet. 7:02, 4 minutes later, 7:02 into the first, to tie the hockey game. And Jonas Höglund, 12:45 into the second, a power play goal made it 2-1 Toronto. And then the third period ended with no goals. So Höglund, the game-winning goal in the second period, with 7 minutes left, and Toronto took a 1-0 series lead. Now it was game number 2 in Carolina, and the Hurricanes were trying desperately to take a 2-0 series lead, to tie the series, excuse me. They had seen last year what happened with the Leafs and the Devils. The Leafs could get very confident with that 2-0 stranglehold. Toronto got 27 shots on Artis Irbe, and Carolina got 33 on Curtis Joseph. And again, a defensive first-second period started everything. And Brett Hedican scored the first goal of the game, 7:31 into the third, to make it 1-0 Carolina. And with 8 seconds left in the third period, Alan McCauley got the puck from Roberts straight from a Sundin bank pass and ripped it topside over Irbe, and he tied the game. But in overtime, Nicholas Wallin scored his second ever overtime winner, 13:42 in, to win it, and gave the Carolina Hurricanes a win and a tie series. Now Carolina got back to the Air Canada Center, now tied at 1. And Carolina got 17 shots only on Curtis Joseph. Toronto only 21 shots on Artis Irbe. And Toronto only saw Irbe once, but Carolina was able to solve Joseph twice in a very close 2-1 game that was very defensive. In the first period, it was Ron Francis who made it 1-0. Captain made a good play for him, 5:15 into the first period. And then with 4 seconds left in the second period, as it was a complete defensive shutdown until that point, Brian McCabe fired one, throwing this Toronto crowd into a frenzy on a power play to make it 1-1. And then it went to overtime again. And Jeff O'Neill, now 6-1 in, shut down the boisterous crowd with his fourth goal of the playoffs to make it 2-1 series lead to the Carolina Hurricanes. Now Carolina came in trying to take a 3-1 series lead back home in Toronto. And boy, what a game it was. They only had 15 shots on goal on Curtis Joseph, but they made the most of their opportunities. And Toronto had 31 whopping shots, but not since the first round had Artis Urbe achieved the shutout, and he got one in Game 4. Carolina in the first period were able to score the first goal with 8 seconds left in the first, and it was the first playoff goal for the rookie Yaroslav Sabota, and Sabota made it 1-0. Nothing happened in the second period score-wise, but then it got to Sami Kapanen in the third period, and 11:41 in, he made it 2-0, and a power play goal for Ron Francis, his fifth of the playoffs, less than 3 minutes to go, making it 3-0 in favor of the Carolina Hurricanes. And he gave Urbe his first shutout since against the Devils, and Carolina headed home with a 3-1 vice grip. I went back to Raleigh, but this time it was Curtis Joseph's chance and time and opportunity to be absolutely brilliant. 19 shots for the Toronto Maple Leafs on Urbe, solving him once, and Carolina had 27 shots on Joseph and nothing past Curtis Joseph. The only goal, the game-winning goal, was in the first period, a power play goal with 1:28 remaining in that opening period by Darcy Tucker, who scored the goal that ended up winning game number 5 for the Maple Leafs and keeping them alive. And it sent them back to Toronto for a Game 6. The conference championship being the opportunity in the building. And this was more of a firepower type game, although the score was also close and also low. Carolina had 35 shots on Curtis Joseph, and Toronto had 36 shots on Artis Urbe in a losing effort. 4 power play chances for the Hurricanes, none converted. 4 power play chances for the Toronto Maple Leafs, none converted. Nothing again scoring in the first and second. And in the third period, again, Carolina struck first. It was Jeff O'Neill, 9:36 into the third. It was 1-0 Hurricanes. It looked like that was how they're going to win it until, with 12 seconds remaining, with 22 seconds remaining, the time was off. Matt Sundin, the great star, finally scored for the Maple Leafs, his second goal of the playoffs. He had a lot of assists. It was time for him, but he finally scored his second goal of the playoffs, ripping it past the short side of Artis Urbe. And then Marty Gelano, who ends up having some other playoff experience later on, but he scores 8:05 into that overtime session, winning the Eastern Conference in Toronto for the Carolina Hurricanes. That was that video on the beginning of the episode, and sent the Hurricanes to play one of the most dominant teams in National Hockey League history for the Stanley Cup Final. And as magical and as good this Hurricane team was able to do, they were able to quelch on the goaltenders, Curtis Joseph. They were able to go on Jose Theodore, hot goalies, and able to go on a Marty Brodeur that had a dysfunctional offense at that point. Now they face one of the great offenses and great teams in the National Hockey League in the 2002 Detroit Red Wings, who had come back after being upset by the Kings the previous year. They had a Luc Robitaille, they had Brett Hull, they had Brendan Shanahan still, they had Steve Yzerman, they had a rookie Pavel Datsyuk, they had an insane amount of offensive talent, as well as the defensive anchors in Murphy and Lidstrom, and the new offensive defenseman in Steve Duchesne, and of course Tomas Holmstrom, and the goaltending in Dominik Hasek. So it was a team that was supposed to win the Stanley Cup anyway, and they had just outlasted the Avalanche in Game 6 and came through with a dominant 7-0 performance. But the Hurricanes were still had a team and still had a chance to win. And so they entered Joe Louis Arena in game number 1 in an absolute boisterous arena. And the Red Wings did not have an enormous amount of shots on Carolina. Carolina had 26 shots on Dominik Hasek, and Carolina was able to steal this game number one win, which not many people expected at all. And the first goal was taken by the Red Wings and sent the crowd to a frenzy, as it was going to, and it was Sergei Fedorov who got a great pass on the wall by Steve Yzerman, and his fifth goal of the year fooled Irbe, a power play tally, but that would be the first, and then Sean Hill would strike back in the second period, 3:30 in, to tie the game for the Carolina Hurricanes. But the Red Wings got the lead back again, and Kirk Maltby got it from Darren McCarty, 10:39 in the second, making it 2-1 Red Wings. But then with 50 seconds left in that second period, Jeff O'Neill tied it and went to the third period, and then Ron Francis, who is an absolute incredible playoff player, if they had won the Stanley Cup, he would have gotten Conn Smythe. 58 seconds into the overtime period, fooled Dominik Hasek and gave the underdog Hurricanes a 1-0 series lead. They got to game number 2, and Carolina needed to get that 2-0 series lead back home, just in case they would have lost 2 down there. And Detroit wanted to tie the series back for some momentum. And Detroit, with their fantastic offense, came through and got 30 shots on Artis Irbe, and he let in 3, but that was enough. And Carolina had 17 shots on Dominik Hasek and only got 1 goal out of it. Once again, it was Kirk Maltby who started the scoring for the Red Wings in the first period. 6:33 in, Chris Draper and Chris Chelios, the guys that got him the puck, and Rod Brindamore with the steal made it an unassisted goal to tie it with a shorthanded goal, 14:47 into the first, and tied the hockey game. But then Nick Lidstrom in the third period, for there was no scoring in the second period, gave the Red Wings the lead back, which ended up being the game-winning goal, 14:52 in from the high slot, A power play goal made it 2-1 Red Wings, and then Chris Draper, with 4:05 left in the third period and final period, sniped it past Irbe and made it 3-1 Red Wings and tied the series going to Raleigh. And this was another absolutely exciting and sensational game. A game that went to 6 periods. The first Stanley Cup the second Stanley Cup final game in 3 years to do that. Detroit ended up getting 53 shots on Irbe in a victorious effort, and the Carolina Hurricanes had 43 shots on Dominik Hasek in a losing effort. Yusef Vasicek scored first in the first period, 14:49 into the first period to make it 1-0 Carolina. And in the second period, Brett Hull off the wall gave it to Igor Larionov, 5:33 in to tie the game for the Red Wings. Jeff O'Neill, 7:34 into the third, made it 2-1 Hurricanes. And then after a pass went off the side of the net by Brett Hull, was able to sash it in 18:46 into the third with less than a minute 15 remaining. He tied the game. And then in a third overtime, after absolute stellar play by both goaltenders, there was a small line change off the side by the Carolina Hurricanes, and they lost the puck as they were trying to jam at it. And coming up was the veteran Igor Larionov, who had already scored a goal in the hockey game, and he spun past the defenseman. I believe it was it was Nicholas Wallin. He sped past Wallin, spun past him, and was able to get Irbe to dip and backhanded it under the bar in the third overtime to give the Red Wings the 2-1 series lead. And now it went to a game number 4. And as good as Hasek was, Dominik Hasek got to an even more stellar level at this point. He was able to get a shutout on 17 shots on the Carolina Hurricanes, stopping every single one of them. The Red Wings got 27 on Artis Urbe and scored 3 of them. There were no goals in the first period. Brett Hull scored one 6:32 into the second to make it 1-0 in favor of the Red Wings. Larionov scored his 5th goal of the playoffs and 3rd goal against the Carolina Hurricanes to make it 3:43 into the 3rd to make it 2-0. And with 6 minutes left, Brendan Shanahan made it 3-0 Red Wings. And that would be the final score, 3-0. And the Detroit Red Wings headed back to Joe Louis Arena with the chance to clinch the Stanley Cup. And the Carolina Hurricanes, they needed all their magic at that time. And again, the defense of the Red Wings was too dominant to let Carolina get any decent shot on Dominik Hasek. They only got 17 on Hasek. Detroit had 27 shots on Artis Urbe. And Thomas Holmstrom, 4:07 into the second, scored first for the Detroit Red Wings and made it 1-0 Detroit. Later in the second period, in the middle of the second period, with 5:56 left, Steve Yzerman went off the bench and tried to jam it past Urbe on a power play. And as it just went wide, the defense shifted from left to right and left the center side of the net wide open, and Shanahan busted one through across to make it 2-0 in what eventually became the game-winning goal and over Urbe. Jeff O'Neill was able to keep the game alive with 1:10 remaining in the second period. And it was a power play goal that made it 2-1. But the third period was more of the same. Great defensive play, great goaltending, wonderful chances for the Carolina Hurricanes, great chances for the Detroit Red Wings. But the Red Wings just let their absolute incredible offense, an incredible team and talent take over. And the Carolina Hurricanes took Urbe out, emptied their net with 45 seconds left. And they brought extra attackers to the wall, and the puck went off of Cole's stick. Yzerman was able to center it off the right side to Shanahan, who ripped it into the wide open cage, ending the Carolina Hurricanes season essentially, and sending the Joe Louis Arena into an absolute tear and an incredible frenzy at that point. And the cup was raised in Detroit, and what a talented, wonderful team it was. But you kind of think the Carolina Hurricanes, their magical story, would it have been enough? It may have been. And they played well in the first 2 games, but it almost brings you a comparison of another team that lost to the Red Wings in the Stanley Cup final recently at that point in 1998, the Capitals, having a chance in the first 2 games and then just not being able to come by and take them at home. And it just wasn't enough. They weren't deep enough. They weren't talented enough probably to win the Stanley Cup on paper. It's alone, but they had the hard work. This is one of the more memorable teams that people tend to forget, and what a year for them. All right. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I really enjoyed making it. And so the next one is going to be on the 2003 Western Conference champion Mighty Ducks of Anaheim. So if you enjoy that, hope you enjoyed this. And good afternoon. Happy hockey.